Okay, you guys, get ready for one of the best, if not the best episodes in the history of our podcast. Rachel Husberg, our guest today, is somebody that every woman in business needs to know. And she is brand new and just starting out. And I just am lucky enough to have been introduced to her early on. And I I have no words. Truly, I have no words. I just need you to listen to this podcast, and then I need you to go meet Rachel, and then I need you to improve your life. Like, that's all I have to say. Let me tell you a little bit about Rachel, and obviously she'll get into this a little bit more in the episode, but Rachel is a certified professional coach who works with couples to help them implement equal partnerships at home. She spent 15 years working in corporate. She's actually a finance girly, just like us, trying to figure out how to have a career, how to have a family, and also stay alive as a human and have time for herself. After a lot of trial and error, she and her partner landed on a few key strategies, what she now calls home place experience design, that have enabled them to actually live the life that they wanted all along as truly equal partners. They now share all aspects of home and family, but underneath that, a partnership has emerged that includes deeper trust, allows for mistakes without resentment, and grants each of them more time and mental freedom to pursue joy and fulfillment. She wants all partnerships to have these same benefits and realize most people just need some guidance on how to turn these intentions into a reality. I love Rachel. And obviously, if you don't know my brand, we're big into the girly and the female and the pink, right? My favorite thing about Rachel is she is not out here being a man hater, which we'll get into this in the episode as well. But this is not some like extreme movement of let's, burn all of the men to the ground and do this ourselves. It's let's do this together in a sustainable way that allows us to both be human beings and also raise a family and also have a business. And so if you have a business, if your partner has a business, if you are struggling with the mental load and the workload that comes with all of that, I need you to know Rachel, and I need you to listen to this episode. It will change your life. Literally, I have sat down with her for an hour before we recorded this episode and went home and like turned my whole life around. And then by the end of this episode, Mackenzie and Becca were like, where do we sign? How do we get involved? This is truly incredible and such a needed thing in today's day and age. So without further ado, please help me welcome Rachel Husberg. Welcome to the Profitability Podcast. I'm Joey.
And I'm Mackenzie.
Join us as we explore success in business and life, proving that while finance may not feel sexy, profitability is. So welcome to the Profitability Podcast. Today we have our March phenomena, and to tell you that I'm excited for this is an understatement because I have been thinking about this since I met you, honestly, because it's been already so applicable in my life since we just had lunch together. And
saying I'm excited is, I assume you were going to say something like better than excited. Anyway.
Would be total hyperbole because I'm not excited to be. No,
that's right. For sure what you're going to say.
To say I'm excited would be an understatement because I have been thinking about, since we went to lunch together, I think about it all the time because this is such a personal thing for me. And I know it's a personal thing for you, Rachel. And I think a lot of the people that we work with could benefit from this conversation. So I'm super excited to publish this. And hopefully give some tips and tricks out, but then also introduce the idea that there is help and people out there that can accomplish this big, heavy thing for you, which I'll let you get into in a second. But today I get to introduce Rachel, who is with us, and I'll let her tell a little bit about her story and what she does, but just know that it's going to be good. It's going to be great.
Thank you. High praise, Joey. That was a really fun lunch. It's always fun for me to get to talk through it, but in a less formal setting, about because you just get really down to like in real life, how are we all operating in our partnerships? What does this actually mean? So I really appreciated being able to chat with you about it. It also just helps me like get more clear on, yes, like what I am trying to help people do is important and matters. So I thank you for your time and thanks for having me here.
Yeah, we're super excited. I want you to give us a whole background of how this business came to be, but before you do that, give me like, high level, what is this business? What do you help people do? What's the mission?
My high level is I help willing and wanting couples who are invested in creating more equality, equity, fairness in their partnership on how they handle home and caregiving responsibilities. Go from good intentions, like they really want that, to actual systems in their life that will work and help them be able to realize that kind of a partnership in their day to day operating model.
Wow. That is, do you have that on a website like that? You nailed it. That is impressive. Yeah.
I think my website says break free from accidental gender norms and intentionally design your partnership is I think what
Wow.
my website says because I believe that it is in we can easily accidentally fall into things we've had modeled, things we see on TV, the communities and societies grew up, and instead of intentionally saying how do we want to operate together and what do we want our life to look like. So I think the website version of what I just said earlier.
I seriously am so impressed that you could get it into one. I don't know if I could even do that about my own business, but that is one of the things that I love about our conversation and what my understanding of how you do this is it's one, which we're going to get into in just a second, not designed to be this like giant man hater movement of they're the problem, so
Yes,
let's just
yes.
go after it. But two, it very much is what do we as a couple want our lives to look like? What are the obstacles standing in our way? It's not a one size fits all of you have to do this and I have to do this and that's the only way it's fair. You don't have a chore chart of man gets this, woman gets this, or partner A gets this, partner B gets this. You're like,
Yeah.
what do you want it to look like and how do we make it work for your situation, which is so cool, so great.
Yeah, what I like to tell people is I don't really think there's a right or a wrong way to do partnership, other than I think the wrong way to do it is to not be intentional. So I know, like, even there, sometimes like the trad wife movement is talked about in a derogatory way, but the truth is I am sure there are couples out there where they have talked about it and said, I want to do this, partner A, and I want to do this, partner B. And they are on the same page with what that means, and that's how they want to live, and that's great. And I am sure that there are others where they accidentally fell into those roles. And I'm not going to ever tell anyone, oh, you think you're happy, but you're not. It's people who fell into those roles and realized it and now are unhappy about it. That's who I am, like, saying there is another way to do it. You just requires an actual conversation and a plan.
I love it so much. Okay, so let's back up to I think your story is such a great painting of how this came to be and why it came to
Yeah,
be and
sure.
why it works. I mean, you're like test subject A of this whole system. And I remember when you told me a lot about your story, I just saw so much that was different in my story, but so much of like, oh, I see how this works no matter the story. So if you're comfortable sharing,
Yeah.
tell us like the background of, your careers and how this all came to be in the last decade and a half or so.
Yeah. Okay, that sounds great. So I've been married for almost 17 years and got married when I was 20, so definitely young, didn't know anything about anything. And we had 1 year left of college. Then my husband was going to grad school. And so, and we were I live in Utah now, still live here. At the time we were living here. And I figured, well, I'll go get a job while he finishes grad school. He was getting a degree, a master's in creative writing. And I had a degree, or I have a degree in humanities with a music emphasis. What do you do with that? I don't know. I became a creative problem solver, is what I liked. I learned how to analyze art instead of numbers, but it is at the end of the day, so that's the same. But so I was like, I don't know what kind of job to get. And this is actually one reason why I know you joke like that I like love listening to your podcast, but it's because my career, despite that, actually started in finance. I got hired to do very basic bookkeeping. I had actually done that in college. Like that's what helped me pay for school. So I knew how to do like some basic numbers. And really, as I learned more about accounting, I came to find if I knew accounting was a thing, that's for sure what I would have studied in college. I'm like CPA, Big Four auditor. Like for sure, that's my path. What it would have been in another life. But I got hired by a tech company, Qualtrics. They're a business here in Utah, and they were really small at the time. And then as the company grew, I started. So I was doing billing and collections. That's like all I was doing. Then I hired more people to do it with me. Then I split it into two teams, like new business clients and renewals, because you guys know this, like renewal revenue needs like its own focus, right? And then it was operationally, how does finance and how do we work with sales? We're at the end of that sales cycle. How are we working with legal to finance the sales and contracts? How are we working with product managers on whatever? So finance sits in the middle of everything, right? And so my career was in that space and I loved it so much. And there is a world in which I would be like working for you all would be like my dream gig. Like you guys are doing all the parts that I like loved of that life. So I grew and did all of that for the first probably 10 or even 11 years at Qualtrics. To kind of then go back in the meantime, my husband graduates with his master's. He told me he wanted to be a writer or like a professor, and I was like, he's gonna want to be a writer. And sure enough, a master's was like enough. He's like, okay, I want to write. And by the time he was done, I was like, Qualtrics is like doing pretty well. It's pretty cool. I'm making like, good enough money here. How about I just keep working and you take 3 years and see what happens with your writing career? Like at the end of 3 years, either you have something to show for it, or you're close, or you're like not close at all, or it turns out you hate it, and then we'll like reevaluate what we want to do with our life. We didn't have any kids yet, so it's a little easier to do that when you don't. So in those 3 years, at the end of that 3 year period, I'm still at Qualtrics. It's like even better than it was before. I'm super happy. I love what I'm doing. And he had signed a contract for a 5 book deal. So it was like, cool. Like we both have good things going. In the 3 years, though, it was maybe like a year or maybe a little less, like a year into that, I came home one day and I was like, why are like, why am I working full time? And like also by full time, it's like early startup tech corporate America. Like I'm like not only working 40 hours, right? Like I'm working a ton. Y'all get that. It's tax season right now, right? Yeah. And like, why am I doing that? And I'm commuting 30 minutes each way. So like add another hour to my day. But then I'm also like picking up the groceries. I'm also like making dinner. Like you are helpful when I say things like you help do it. Um, but like, why am I owning all these things? And to my partner Chris's credit, all I had to say was, hey, like, I don't think this makes sense. Because for me, it was less like, you're a bad person. It was like this logically, like the math isn't mathing, right? And when you are working, you are writing a book, but you have way more flexibility in your day. You're also not like literally sitting there writing for 8 hours. Like he can't produce that way. And so all it took was me saying that and him being like, yeah, you're totally right. And so, which I know not everyone has that kind of conversation with their partner. And so like insert here, that is another thing that I do with couples is if you're like, I am zero interested in being an equal partner, that's like a problem that I don't solve. But if someone's like, I thought I was a good partner, but I didn't realize that there was more I could be doing, like, awesome. Like, let's talk about that too. So because I know that not everyone's partner is like, of course, flip the switch. I will now do all the stuff. And so because we kind of were always in a less traditional partnership where a woman was working outside the home, earning most of the income, and a man, again, when I say traditional in like a um heterosexual like partnership. But, and
Right.
then a man was home and yes, working, but that a writing income is like not stable. You know what I mean? And like, and also for the first, those 3 years, he wasn't making any money. He was like writing the book and pitching it and selling it and all the things. Um, and so therefore took ownership of a lot of the home stuff. So because we kind of started from basically the beginning in a less traditional sense, it forced us to have conversations like, hey, why are we doing this way? This doesn't seem like the way we want to keep going. But what I will say, it is a continuous conversation because every few years it'd be like, what's happening? Like we're out of whack again. I'm doing so many things, and then we had a baby. So then it's like, oh my gosh, like and y'all know what that is. Like so layer that on there. And then it's okay, we settle again, then we moved. Okay, then I get a promotion at work, or and then now he isn't hypothetically writing a book. He actually has to write one 500-page novel every year, right? Like for his contract. So it's like your life is constantly changing. Then we have another baby, right? So it's just like a whole thing. And so, we'd have something that was working and then it like wouldn't, then it'd fall apart and we'd be like all mad at each other and like, why is this happening again? And let's see, this was a few years ago. So at Qualtrics at some point I was like, I like what I'm doing, but I'm feeling bored. What else do I want to do? And worked with a career coach, which I knew about coaching, but it was like executive coaching is kind of what mostly I'd heard about. But like I had, but then was looking into it, found a career coach. She was amazing. And that was the first time I actually intentionally been like, well, what do I want to do with my life? Because with the finance career, it sort of like accidentally happened to me. And it turned out I was really good at it. And it turned out, therefore, I loved it. But I hadn't really chosen that on purpose. So then as exploring that, I was like, well, this coaching thing is pretty interesting. And then with that, so I am a certified coach. So I went and did that while I was still at Qualtrics. And then with that, they kind of say, well, what's your niche? What's the problem you want to be solving? And so in exploring that, I was like, well, the problem I want to solve is this equal partnership situation. And because it was something that we had constantly been working at, and even though it would succeed, fail, I knew that we were like living that way more than so many of my other, especially female friends at Qualtrics. They were working full time, just like most of their partners. Many of them were making more money than their partners, and they still were doing all this. And it was always so frustrating to me because I was like, well, I'm not living that way. Like, clearly it's possible to not have to go through what you're going through. And they were mad about it, right? Like, if they're like, hey, I don't care, it's fine. Like I said, I'm not here to tell anyone they're actually secretly unhappy, but they weren't happy about it, right? And so I said, that's the problem I want to solve. And part of that too was, okay, well then what am I doing with it? And what I realized, so now to kind of like come back to this part of the story, to fail, succeed. Life is always changing. Our system never can keep up with our life changes. And so a few years ago, we just overhauled the whole thing. And I will definitely like credit, there's a book out there called Fair Play, by Eve Rodsky. And there's like a documentary on her work and stuff that Reese Witherspoon's company made and everything. And we got that book. We read it. It is a structure and a system, but it's DIY. It's like read this book and follow believe, like learn about and believe these principles and then implement this process. And we did it the way that we did it was like we read the book together. It's like I'll read a chapter out or a paragraph out loud. You'll read a paragraph. What thoughts do we have, And as prepared as we were to have a conversation about like sharing more fairly is, to use her term. And we've also had like, countless hours of therapy. Like I'm like, if there was any couple who was like prepared to have this conversation, it would be us. And it was still really uncomfortable. Like reading that book and reading chapters on, I think my time's more valuable than yours because I make more money. I was like, I am the problem in that chapter, right? Like that I think
Yeah.
that the book was good. We got through it. And then with like step one of her system, okay, do it, step two of her system. And so we did it. And over time we refined a lot to be like, okay, so on paper it says XYZ should work, but it, parts of it are not working. So how do we want to adjust and change that? And as I was starting to implement parts of it and like what's not working, I realized, I really should just run my family like I run a business. And that sounds very sterile because, family should be like, your home should be a haven and like you love your family. And I personally hate when businesses are like, we're all a family. It's like, you're not a family at work. You will lay someone off one day who doesn't deserve it. And I hope to never lay off my family member, so it's like,
Right.
it feels weird to like equate business and family, but like principles, operating principles. I know y'all, of course, are like the magicians and believe in those and know about them, but bringing them to home, I was like, I feel like that would help us. And so, and she does encourage people to like have regular recurring conversations about how it's going. But what does regular recurring mean? What do you talk about in those, discussions on how it's going? Because you kind of divide the work and of like who's going to do what, and then you should maintain that, but maintenance needs its own process, right? And so how do we maintain? So I will always credit like I took a lot from her thing and like started living it. And what I then feel like I introduced to that to really find success for us was like a couple of things. So one was, again, like we both had this inherent belief that gender norms are wrong. Like that there's no reason just because I'm a woman and just because he's a man, we should therefore be doing certain things. We both already firmly believe that. And if you don't firmly believe that, then no matter what system you implement, it's not going to be sustainable. And the that book by itself doesn't really cover those things. So I hear a lot of people who I hear there are tons of people having success with that system, but the ones who aren't, and they tell me they're frustrated because one, it fell apart, and it's because both of them were not totally bought in on equal partnership and like rejecting gender norms. And the other thing too is like that book has a little bit of a lens that can feel a little like attacking men, you are the problem. I don't think it's intended to do that, and I think if you are like secure in yourself, you would read it and say like, be introspective and be like, okay, I think that could be right about me. But if you're like not there, then you read it and you will feel defensive. So again, it's like, okay, if these conversations were hard for us and I feel like we were very prepared to have that kind of conversation, then how are other people doing this? So one, it was, okay, I want to bring in, how do we like and this is where my now coaching work is really helpful. But how do we bring in part of the like the beginning conversation of, let's just level set on gender norms. And do we actually reject those? What does that mean? Let's like get emotionally, mentally bought in on this, because that's what will block your success of implementing what I tell you to do or what anyone tells you to do. So I kind of feel like I've added that. And then again, the core, like how do you figure out who's going to do what? Great. But how do you maintain it in a way that no matter how your life changes, your system will never fail you? That's the other part that I feel like we really have honed and figured out and also added in. And we kind of like read that book, implemented things. We were like refining the maintenance process. And then through that period of time, we had like Chris started teaching. So he now is also a professor. He teaches some English classes and then but he still writes. So he started a new job. I got laid off. So that was like a totally unexpected massive life change. Our kids were in, like our youngest was in a full day daycare that now had aged out of and was in stupid half day kindergarten. It was a waste of everyone's time. And so now it was like not in full day care. Now you're in half day care. And we also like had a summertime like nanny type like helper when my oldest was out of school because she wasn't in the daycare, right? And then that summer it was like, where I'm not working, you're not working, like we won't have one. And then I started and I was building this business, and I now have like a new job. So it was like through all of that change, how we still talked about and made decisions and shared home responsibilities and caregiving responsibilities actually never broke. Like through all of that, like it's not because we kept doing the same thing. Who was doing what changed a lot and changed multiple times in that phase of life, but the ability to not have anything fall through the cracks, to still feel like it feels fair. Once I was working zero, it made sense for me to do way more than I'd ever done before, but still what's going to feel, equal is a hard word because the equals like, we both have 5 items or whatever. But when you're both working full time, as much as possible equals like a good word to try to achieve, but at least equitable, right? So through all of that, like the system we had implemented was like, hey, this is actually still working. So then I was like, all right, I think like I'm probably onto something if through all of that, like we did not kill each other when it came to like who's doing what and trusting each other to like do the thing and all that kind of stuff. So all of those bits and pieces kind of came together for me to be like, this is the problem I want to solve with people. This is how I've solved it. And so this is like what I will teach other people. But to your point about like everyone's life and like stories and everything are different. A couple who doesn't have kids is going to have different things than a couple who does have kids. A couple where they're both working full time versus a couple where one of them is part time or one of them is full time stay at home parent, but full-time stay-at-home parent job is also not equal to like I go to an office every day job, right? So like, but no matter what it is, by having a person, like a real life person like me, helping learn about you and what's going on in your world, and then say, here's the principles and the tools, but let me help you implement them in a customized way that works. Like we may do something on a weekly basis and it makes more sense for you to do it bi-weekly or monthly, or maybe there's something that we don't really have to deal with at all, like we don't have pets for instance, but you have pets, let's talk about pets. So I feel like there's also this element of let me customize it to you so that you actually do it, so then you actually have the success versus again a one size fits all and then something in your life isn't exactly right and now the whole thing falls.
Well, I love, like I said at the beginning, that it's adaptable to different lifestyles, but it's adaptable to different life cycles too, like you mentioned, with all of the changes. For us, like like you said, we've got the first half of the year is tax season, and that is crazy for me. And the second half of the year is football season, which is crazy for him.
Yeah.
And so we can't have the same system all year round. And then somewhere in the middle, he's a school teacher, so he gets the summer off. And kids have the summer off versus when they don't. Like, it has to adapt to your values, and it also has to adapt to what's happening in that moment. And when we were talking, Mark, my husband, had just come off of his surgery on his Achilles tendon. So
Oh
he
yeah,
was on
that's right.
crutches,
Yes.
and so like even the unexpected things have to adjust and change. And so I love that your system, like you said, it's just a little bit different so that it adapts and grows and changes with you, scales with you, contracts with you, like whatever. There's a little bit of moldability to life because life happens, and that is the hardest part. Business looks different. Life, kids look different, schedules look different. So,
Yeah. And the thing I'll say about that too is the more what we have found, because I think this is another key to the system not breaking, is the more that we both were really showing up, being like, I commit to do these things, I will fully own them, and actually then you do them, you're
yeah,
building trust with your partner, right? Like I know that like I can like be like, that's not my thing. I don't have to use my mental energies to keep track of it. And you do it and you do it in a way that we knew like we would both feel okay with. So the trust gets really high. And then something happens like you have to have surgery or you lose your job all of a sudden or like whatever it is. And maybe like, so one partner is going to lean in way more to help that partner. Is that equal? No, definitely not. But the willingness to do it is there. And because you've built that trust, and I know that if the, tables were flipped, you would be doing the same thing for me. So I'm willing to do it because being rigid with this is my list, this is your list, and there's no room for it to ever change. Or even if you're like, I'm going to change it every month. Okay, well, middle of the month and something happens, what do you do? Right. And so I think part of that, the solution also is this like high trust with each other, which doing the system over and over again successfully is part of the trust building. So it like feeds itself as well.
yeah.
That and that's been like a really I don't know, key part of it not failing for us through all of that life change.
I feel like I can share this because um, anyone that knows them would share this, but I think about, it reminds me of, it was 2008. And my parents, I was living at home. I was I would have been in high school probably. And my parents were going through it like everybody in 2008, right? Like my dad had been laid off. He was trying to decide he's a serial entrepreneur. And so he had just left like one of his only W-2s that I can even think of and was kind of like, okay, is it time to start something else or should I be looking for a job? Well, the whole world's looking for a job. You know, we're going through that whole thing. My mom's working very part-time. You know, it's definitely not paying the bills by any means. It was kind of just a thing that was happening. And then at the same time, October rolls and my mom has to have emergency gallbladder surgery. And then November rolls around and obviously it's the holidays. We're prepping. We have a couple birthdays towards the end of, that time. My grandparents are 2 doors down. My mom's parents, they are coming over and trying to help. And my parents have 4 kids who are all living at home and trying to manage the chaos and the emotions around all of that. Then December rolls around, which any mom with 4 kids knows what December feels like on a normal December, let alone unemployment hanging over your head. And then 2 days before Christmas, she slips on some ice and fractures her leg in 3 places.
No.
And it's just like school has just gotten out. It feels like we've finally made it to the end of the chaos. Like now we can just enjoy. And, she's in emergency surgery once again. Unplanned expenses, unemployment, it just like my parents still to this day refer to dark times as 2008. They're like, this is just, my mom will tell me all the time, this is just your 2008, things are just feeling or whatever. And this did not exist. Like there was no talk of, you do this, I do this, that was so abnormal. And I consider and did in 2008 considered my parents to be very progressive. My mom is not I will have dinner on the table when you arrive home and be wearing my pearls mom. She is not a trad wife. She never has been. She's very progressive in that sense. And still, like nothing like this was ever talked about. And maybe it is now, but certainly not when I was growing up.
Yeah.
And hearing you talk about this system and putting it now that I'm kind of in that phase of life for me, and then thinking about especially when you say the trust, I mean, the resentment and the emotional chaos among all of us during that time was so much. And I remember so many times just feeling like, we're all going to hate each other after this. Like we're all just stressed and we don't know what's going to happen. And, we want to help, but everyone's just, on edge all the time. And I just have to think that if there had been, not that my parents' marriage isn't great because it is, but if there had been more of that trust that you're talking about, that when life happens, things are going to tip one way or the other because it's temporary and we know that it's all going to work out in the end. Like the way that would have just brought everything down a level. It still would have been hard. Still would have been dealing with unemployment. We still would have been dealing with mom can't get out of bed to wrap Christmas presents, whatever it might be, but it would have been that much easier, And so it's almost like a piggy bank for dark times, kind of.
Yeah.
Like when you're building and building and building on that trust and it's working, when that crap happens, it's not just one more thing that's breaking down. Your marriage is there to kind of like hold it together in the meantime.
And lest anyone think that Chris and I never had any resentment problems, like the big overhaul we did, which was like, we got to find a book, we're going to read it, we're going to do, we're going to explore all the stuff. It was because the up, down, we were like in a down. And it was just like one of those moments where you think to yourself, it would be easier if I was doing this by myself. And for some people, frankly, that probably is true. But I knew that it was like I was feeling that, but I knew that was not true. But the fact that I had gotten to that point made me be like, well, we need to do something. We can't keep doing the same thing over and over again, which for us was, we're doing it fine, then it falls apart. Doing fine, then it falls apart. Like we need a different thing. We need sustainability in whatever we do. Well, resentment being an outcome of not doing this is very real. And like I said, like the high trust, not only is it like, hey, like I know that when life is crazy, like one of us is going to like be able to lean in and help each other, but also we continually make mistakes one of us totally drops the ball on the thing we're supposed to be doing. And when you are like, your bank is empty, one mistake is like, oh, of course. You don't care about me, you don't care about this thing, you're not taking it seriously. When trust bank is super high, there is so much grace for mistakes. You're like, hey, happens to all of us, whatever. So the opposite of resentment, so much of that is the outcome of really being bought in and living in this concept of equitable, equal partnership.
Yeah.
I find it so interesting. No, sorry, I'm so awkward when I first start talking. So
You have to announce. Sorry.
You don't just need to own it. Just,
Floor is yours.
anyway, I think it's interesting because both my husband and I work from home. And so we've kind of had to learn that balance of like, okay, we need to figure out who has the kids when someone's in a meeting or who's going to start dinner. And it took us a while to kind of figure out that balance. But kind of going off that, people that I talk to, when we talk about kind of this balance, I'm not saying we're perfect whatsoever. We're still adapting, still trying new things to make it work. It's just like when I tell people this, they're so surprised that we're able to make it work in any shape or form. And it's so surprising to me, but I think it has to do with the fact that social media and the world out there puts the perspective of the woman having to be the person at home, doing the dinner, doing the housework, and the husband goes and gets the money. But nowadays, women are working from home, still being moms. Dads are working, still doing dad stuff. So I was curious, how do you help people like stop letting social media like impact how they run their families? Does that make sense, kind of?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And if I could insert something before I directly answer your question,
Of course.
because 100% it is social media or media of any kind. Like, how many movies are out there where the couple is the way that Chris and I are? Like zero. I don't think I've seen one yet. Like I jokingly am like, I'm gonna start a podcast where I just watch movies and TV shows and I just call out the unequal partnership and the mental load issues and the whatever, you know what I mean? Apparently living this way is not interesting enough to be online, right? So I think it's any kind of media 100%. But what I will also say is even someone who was like, I'm off social media. They don't look at any social media. They don't watch TV. They don't read books. Like, let's say that they did none of those things. The family you grow up in, what is modeled from your parents? Like neighborhood, community type thing that you grow up in. Maybe you grew up in a faith tradition that also dictated some certain kinds of things. And so even beyond that, people become adults and have been inundated with this subconscious conditioning from everywhere you can think about it, right? What they've learned and seen around them, and then social media, like either reinforcing that, or even if they're not saying that's wrong, if they're not saying this way is better, I don't like to use the word better, but for the sake of our conversation, say better, right? Like this, like it without the actual counter of like, well, what's the opposite of gender norms on how you who's caregiving, who's cleaning, who's cooking, who's mowing the lawn, who's in charge of IT, who's in charge of the car oil changes, right? Like we could gender probably every chore on the list with if you were to guess who would do it, without the opposite being modeled of like, here is a different way to do it. Even if like people are kind of realizing, oh, I don't really like this way, without that, they're gonna still absorb that as like the thing to do, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think it's a combination of family, community, what you were raised with, and social media. So to now come to your question, like how do you help people kind of get past that? I think, and the reason I brought up the other parts is because I think part of it is acknowledging that you became an adult being mostly, in my opinion, subconsciously taught to be a woman is to do these things, to be a man is to do these things. And And even to get even farther away from gender, to be someone who is working full time is to do this things, and someone who is at home more does these things, right? Like you could put a lot of labels or different categories on it. But so I like to start there. And here's where I'll plug another book, which I'm like, what is the part where it's lacking of like, well, what if you don't already believe in abandoning gender norms? There's this other book called Equal Partners, Establishing Gender Equality at Home by Kate Mangino. I found this book last summer. It was everything I could ever hope for on the topic of like, how do you learn about gender norms? How do you get away from them so that you're now available to like implement a system like mine? So she doesn't really go into like the systems and like she has a lot of examples of modeling that kind of behavior, but not like a program, right? But her book is amazing. I'm actually doing a workshop with her in March, so I'm super excited. I reached out to her and was like, I love your book. Can we do something together? And she said yes. So anyway, yeah. But so the reason I brought that up is because I think people need to realize to a lot extent, like it's not your fault. You were overtly taught and subvertly taught to operate the way you're operating. So step one is like awareness, right? And so uh, realizing what I see on social media reaffirms what I think is correct. And so therefore I do it. But I think that's correct in the first place because it turns out I learned this all along from my own parents, from my community, from the spaces I was in, from, what all the other things. So I think, first it's like just become aware that gender norms are a thing. Become aware of where they came from. Become aware of how all genders are victims of social conditioning, are perpetrators of the problem, right? Like we talked about this little, or I think maybe Joey, you brought this up, but like there's so much like, oh, man hating men are the problem because they don't like understand the mental load and like they do all these things and they're benefited by gender equality. And the truth is like women perpetuate it too, right? There are a ton of men who want to do more, and what happens? You didn't do it correctly. I'm going
Hmm.
to redo it. Or like I say I want to let you own something, but you're not going to do it the exact way that I really want you to do it, right? Like we don't let go. So it's like we're also Becca, thank you. Good job acknowledging yourself. Yeah, but you know
All
what?
of us.
All of us, both hands up, you know? Um and so it's like, oh, so awareness that like we are both perpetrators, right? Like all genders are perpetrating and perpetuating the problem. And like I said, and both are victims and both can be part of the solution. So again, the awareness that, I mean, I say that those are truths. I believe those are truths, but the awareness of that data and that information that's out there is like step one for me. So like plug for Kate Mangino's book again because it's such a great way to start it. She also is so intentional about being gender inclusive. She's also so intentional about it not being like blaming men. And throughout it, it's got like questions you can like answer together or chat about or whatever. So I think that's like a great option. So once you have awareness of it, then the next thing is, okay, well then what do I want to believe? What do I want to think about partnership? And I know there is a category of people where they are like, I firmly believe that I should not have to do XYZ because that's women's work or that's men's work. That category of people for sure exists. And then there are people like what Chris and I are trying to be, which is like, we continuously fail, but we keep trying, which is like, we're really trying to be equal partners to each other. There are no gendered, like, who should be doing what. And I think that there are more in the middle than people give credit to of I actually really want to be a good partner. I just didn't know that that's not what I was doing. I didn't and or I didn't know how I don't know how to do that, what is the way? And so, awareness that when you come across the awareness, if your reaction is, "Oh man, I didn't know that that's what I was doing." But this is resonating. I think I was doing that. I want to do better. I want to do differently. And again, for all genders, all people could get that information and you do some introspection, have that reaction. And if your response is, I don't believe in this. I don't want equal partnership, then I could not answer your question, Becca. That is like a problem that I do not solve. But people who are like, oh, that is what I want. That's actually what I thought I was doing, but apparently I'm not doing that. Then it's great. Decide what you do want to believe instead. Because accidentally you weren't believing that. Because if I believe that what we believe, and sometimes the word beliefs is tricky because it's like, okay, maybe again, there's like a very concrete, you could write down, I believe this thing. But beliefs many times are like accidentally, subconsciously absorbed, right? And so you maybe didn't think I intentionally believed men should do this and women should do this, or if I'm working outside the home or inside the home, I should do this, whatever. But consciously, intentionally choose, what do I want to think now about partnership? Okay, gonna write those all down or talk about them with my partner or me, whoever it is. And then it's great. What actions align to those beliefs and those values? If I don't want to think women should do this, men should do this, or maybe you're the same gender, but one of you works way more hours than the other. And so therefore that's the thing that you think is differentiating. Because you work more hours, then you shouldn't have to fill in the blank. So if there's any sort of identifier that is making you think because of that I shouldn't have to, rather than again it being intentional, then now saying, well, I want to believe this instead. And then you start to figure out, like, because I'm choosing to believe that, my actions are going to change. Because accidentally, because I believed something else, apparently, my actions were aligned with that other belief, even though I didn't choose it on purpose. And then as you start to figure out like what actions are aligned to that, and that's where my system that I've created kind of comes in place, right? It's like for people who are like, I actually want to be an equal partner. It's like, okay, well, in my opinion, an action that is connected to the value of equal partnership is we look at the list of all the things that we have to do in our life to operate the way that we want to be living. And we don't decide, well, because I'm a man, I'm a woman, we will do these things. We say, well, which one of these are we like, I like doing that, I don't like doing that. Which ones do I maybe feel more naturally inclined to do? Now, what I will say, because you get caught here, is it's easy to say, like, well, you're better at that. And it's like, yeah, I'm better at that because I've been the one doing it
Yeah.
for however many years, And not only that, but like I think about tidying up. And little girls are more expected to be clean and their room should be clean, and being messy is like a sign of something is wrong with you as a little girl. Boys are messy, and it's like, yeah, of course, you're a boy. Boys are messy. So it's not, I don't even mean as like an adult woman. I mean, like, I'm talking 5-year-old girl Rachel and 5-year-old boy Chris, what was okay. And we accidentally learned that it was okay to be messy or it was okay to be tidy. And now here we are 35 years old, and well, actually, this is a bad example because Chris is way tidier than me, but you guys get what I'm saying. But now here we are 35 years later, and I've had 30 years to practice tidying and you haven't, because it hasn't been expected of you. And I've also potentially been enabling your untidiness because I'm mad that you're not tidying. But then what do? I go tidy it for you, right?
Yeah.
So that's like
Yeah.
a part of our contributions to the problem, So the whole like, well, you're better at it, I reject as a reason to choose to do something. There's hardly anything on a list that an adult person could not learn how to do. And caveat, things like ADHD and any other kind of like mental emotional disorders, like I acknowledge that that's of course going to play a factor and going to be part of what makes sense for us each to do. But I'll just say for a lot of the population, 2 adults could learn how to do just about anything and then be in charge of that thing. So it's like a very long answer to your question, Becca, but it's like get the awareness of like why you are operating the way you are today, and then choose to continue to accept that or reject it. Decide if you reject, decide what you want instead, and then figure out what actions and behaviors are aligned with doing that thing.
I feel like it's important to be that change for our children too, so they know mom and dad both know how to clean or know how to work together, and then we can pave that path for our kids so they won't run into this, hopefully, down the road, right?
You're totally right. I know I always jokingly tell people, like, ask me in 30 years when the couples I'm helping have children and those children grew up in a home where the parents were operating like that and they are now adults in their own relationships. and tell me how they're doing, and then I'll know if it
Yep.
really made a difference. So I'm like, I need some like very like a longitudinal like 30-year study, done on this. But Becca, you're 100% right. Because again, what did I just say? The way that we were all raised impacted what kind of adults we became. So the way that two parents who are to their best of their abilities continuously trying to be in equal partnership, the kids are going to grow up in that environment and adopt those values or beliefs about who should be doing what.
Totally. Love it.
As women, life demands a lot from us, but there is no reason for you to put your business goals on hold. At the Profitability Project, we understand that your business can't be your whole life. Balancing personal life and work is always hard, and we want to help you make the most of every day. We are here to craft financial strategies to help you achieve the lifestyle you want. With options ranging from online courses to done-for-you services, you'll discover new ways to maximize profitability, streamline your operations, and take the guesswork out of taxes. We have what you need to take your business to the next level. Interested? Learn more about the Profitability Project at theprofitabilityproject.com. That's theprofitabilityproject.com. Get ready to grow your business without sacrificing your entire life.
I should mention that after we went to lunch, I had like all of these thoughts and ideas, and it was right before the new year. And as I do, I'm like, new year, we're going to clean house, like, get our
Yeah.
lives put together.
Yeah.
But it's also like, I know I'm going into tax season. We had some time off for the holidays. Like, I felt like, had like kind of a new perspective. And to be totally clear, Mark and I have done couples therapy for years in total and individual therapy for decades in total. Like,
Yep.
we have
Same.
done our
Same.
work. Yeah. And kudos to our marriage therapist, who was amazing when I first started this business, because I had no idea what I was getting myself into and all the things that came with that. But she really helped us kind of set up a system. But exactly what you described happened, where life changed, things changed. We pivoted 12 different times in 12 different ways, and it just wasn't really working the same way. But I want to point out that, and I haven't, done your system, but after our conversation, I was like, I'm just going to see like what happens when I, write all this down. One of my favorite things that you said when we talked was you said you kind of have people write out what's important to them. And that includes everything that has to get done to survive and keep your kids alive, like feeding them. But it also includes things like sending Christmas cards and visiting the neighbors and doing community service and like all of these other things. And when life gets hard, sometimes it's hard to recognize which things need to be let go and which things to keep. And when you are the person and you don't have a system, when you're the person that's in charge of all of the extra things and you insist on doing all of those things, it's really easy, at least in my experience, to just every little thing is putting me over the deep end. So every little thing is just resent.
Yep.
And the reality is, when even we have a conversation about, this is tier 1 basic survival, this is tier 2, okay, a little bit better, tier 3, and then tier 4 is the neighbor Christmas gifts. All of a sudden it was like things got really hard around Christmas or whenever. I was like, okay, we're not doing neighbor gifts this year. Big deal. And it didn't turn into, oh, he is not pulling his weight. It turned into, life's crazy and we have to let go. And just the amount of like relief and like less pressure that we had as people, but also as a couple, was like huge. And it sounds so silly, but just knowing that I was like, it's just not going to happen. When I looked at it as a system and could knock things off that way, instead of being like, where are you to pick up the weight or the extra? It didn't turn into a me versus him. It just turned into a, life's crazy and we can just drop some things off and let it go. And when when the system is there and it's working, it is really wild to me how, like you said, I come home at 9 o'clock because it's been a long work day and we're trying to get stuff done. And he's picked up the slack that day. I mean, life-changing, literally nothing short of life-changing. And then the next time he comes home and he's exhausted, I'm not going, well, we all have hard lives, tough, whatever. Like, you still got to show up. I'm like, oh my gosh, of course. Like, let me step in for one. It's so much easier to have that room to be like, let me step in and help.
Yeah.
And I was shocked when we, way back before we even did any couples therapy, like I had moments where I was like, this would probably be easier to do alone because it feels like I'm just doing it anyway, plus another person. But there were so many times, every single time I had that thought, I was like, but I just don't want to. That's not the life that I really want. I want this life with Mark, who I love dearly. And we built this family together. And on paper, this is everything I dreamed of. I just want it to also work for me. And that's what you do, I think, is like, let's make it the life you want and not burn you out at the same time.
Yes. I will add that to another one sentence to
Put that on the
describe what I
website.
do. Thank you. Well, the have it all is like you were saying earlier, get more clear on what the all is, right? In a season of life where you're like, we can also do the neighborhood Christmas gifts. We will keep doing the neighborhood Christmas gifts. But being able to quantifiably look and say, these things are not important right now. These are the most important. So the all is like flexible, right? The have it all is like, well, right now, all is these things. And later, all is these things, you know? And yeah, not being able to lose sight of what, again, I say what's most important. What I really mean is sometimes it's what is the bare minimum necessary to survive, like you said. But the fact that we are doing that, and because we were able to say no to the other things for now, and then therefore not be totally burned out and dead because we tried to do them, and now we're mad at each other about everything, you are able to get back to adding a few more things onto the list that are also important to you because you like didn't totally deplete yourself.
Not only that, but I didn't like ruin my marriage in the process.
Yes.
And like perpetuate a, like seed of resentment that turned into this huge thing. Because 3 months later, when life eases back up, okay, we had each other's backs. And I think it's important to note too, like, it's not only just gender norms, it's societal norms of like everything that should happen, like the neighbor gifts. I mean, like we have neighbors in our lives who we're very close with and we're good friends with. And as things got crazier and crazier and crazier, and after talking to you, I was like, okay, this is the first thing to go. There were so many moments where I felt a ton of shame of like, I'm a horrible friend. I'm not showing up for people in my life. But then when I really sat down and thought, I'm like, it sounds bad, but like, I would rather give up that relationship if that's what has to happen to keep my family put together and keep showing up for my kids and keep building this business that's way long-term,
Yep.
Then have a friendship with someone who does or doesn't understand. And the reality is that they were there waiting at the end of it. They understood because life gets crazy for everybody. And so it really helped me prioritize in the moments of the chaos of like, it's going to be okay to let this thing go. Even though I'm feeling a lot of shame of, I should show up as a neighbor, I should show up in my church, or I should show up to all these things and I'm failing. I was like, at the core of my beliefs is that my family is first priority. And so I'm just going to implement that for a while. And it all worked out. It was all fine. And all of that shame I was able to just let go of eventually and kind of work through and be like, no, it's okay. Those are tier 4, they're just the baby extras that when there's energy there, I will get to them. And I totally have.
You said that was a bad example, but that was a perfect example. And I appreciate your vulnerability, willing to say like, I felt shame about this, because the thought I had with this, like feeling that is, and Becca, this goes a little bit back to the question about how do people move from, point A to point B and stop, believing what they're seeing, and what beliefs do you want to choose, is there's a lot of couples where this sort of, well, she values all these things that I don't value. You know, I don't value neighborhood gifts. So you want to go do them and stress yourself out? That's like on you, right? But there is some gendered social expectations that Joey is a bad woman because she didn't do neighborhood gifts that Mark probably doesn't get the hate for. In your world, your neighbors didn't hate you, but you know what I'm saying? And
Yes.
so that's another thing that we kind of explore together when the comment of, well, she wants to do all these things that don't matter. Now, sometimes one of them is doing things that don't matter. And so we can talk about that, because sometimes like, I thought this was important to you. I thought this was important to you. We both don't care. Like, cut it out, don't do it. Some of it is, okay, to your point, Joey, the reason you want to do it is because there is a societal expectation that you should do that thing. But what do you want? What do you want more? And if you want this thing more, as painful as it will be to like rewrite that fear of like what will happen if I don't do the neighborhood gifts, maybe you decide it's worth it to rewrite that fear because that this other, like you said, like my family is core for you, you want to preserve that. So that's another thing that's like helpful to explore whenever I hear the like, well, I don't care about that, And the other thing I thought too, when you were sharing about this was, I think it was like a couple comments earlier when you were like, it's been a long day for you. He's picked up the slack. Sometimes it's been a long day for him. You picked up the slack, right? But the trust is there, so you're willing to do it.
Yeah.
There are always going to be things that you could not plan for that happen, and one of you is going to choose to lean in and help or not. That being said, what I love about implementing a system is, why not plan the things that you can plan so that it doesn't constantly feel like, oh, well, this thing happened, who's going to deal with it? For instance, bedtime routine. Because I know not all couples have kids. We all have kids on this podcast, so I'm going to go with kids. Bedtime routine. We look at our calendar and we say, this week, what evening commitments do we each have? And let's predetermine who's in charge of bedtime. My husband, Chris, is teaching at Salt Lake Community College this semester. We live in Provo, which is like 45 minutes away, and he teaches an evening class. So he gets home like right when the girls are going to bed. And so it's like a no-brainer. I'm in charge of bedtime. Monday and Wednesday, I'm in charge of bedtime. And if I have another thing I want to go do that I'm invited to instead, I will get a babysitter, right? Like, it's not an option for him to do it. So it's like, great. Monday, Wednesday, I know those are mine. Okay. Tuesdays could be up in the air, but some Tuesdays I have book club. And so he knows but we can see on the calendar, book club Tuesday is this week. So therefore you're on bedtime routine, right? Okay, Thursday is whatever. And you go and you go and you go on. There's a number of things that part of our system is weekly planning. And so in our weekly planning that we are looking at a calendar and we know like we need to assign morning routine, bedtime routine, weekend meals, like for feeding children. And we know what morning routine, bedtime routine includes, right? Like, we've already established that. So it's like on the calendar, we can see who's doing what, plug it in. And then like now, like we're 90% of the way there. And usually a week in advance, nothing is going to impact that. I have like zero mental energy spent on, oh my gosh, I'm like, to use your example, oh, I'm like home late and I feel so bad. I hope Mark did something. You're like not even thinking about it. You're like, we already established Mark's on bedtime routine. And maybe it's like, hey, you're on bedtime routine for 3 weeks in a row. Maybe that's how you do, because it's tax season, or you are because it's like every Friday night or whenever football games are, like you're doing it, or it's like end of semester, he's grading a gazillion things, right? So I'm not saying it has to be every other day, but you all know what generally your life seasonality looks like. So plan around that as much as you can. Now I have even more energy and mental like function to handle when the unexpected happens, because I'm not also trying to like puzzle things that I could have totally planned earlier. So that was, as you were sharing all these things, those are kind of like two other things. But
yeah. And as you write these things down, at least, like I said, my very rudimentary attempt at this, but like as we kind of wrote things down, I was like, why aren't we having my 7-year-old do that? Like, she is fully
Totally.
capable. And it's amazing how I was like, you know what? I have wanted to involve them and I have wanted to teach them that they need to participate. And it was really easy to find the things that are now theirs, and they own that on a weekly basis and a monthly basis, and getting them more involved. And it's been so awesome. And there's definitely these moments of like, okay, I need to like actually figure this out. Like, we did it in January, the way that I, again, tried to piece it together based on what you said. And
I would love to see what it is sometime. I am so impressed.
it's a spreadsheet. Are you surprised? It's a spreadsheet.
Well, what I give my clients is also a spreadsheet.
Yes. Okay. I'm on the right track. I know that I need to actually work with you because it definitely is like, there's gaps. But after 30 days of doing it, I was like, okay, so this worked really well.
I never know if it's going to be like 30 seconds or 4 minutes or yeah. It's funny that we very much need your system in our house because my husband is a police officer and we have very different schedules. Like, my schedule is like Monday through Friday. I work, and then like his is variable. So like sometimes he works Monday through Friday. Sometimes it's Wednesday through Sunday. Like, it just kind of depends on the week.
Yeah.
And so like we always, like, I joke with everyone. I'm like, if he's off, he does bedtime. Like, if he's not working, he's on bedtime duty. Like, so that's like usually like 4 or 5 days in a row. And then I take the other 4 or 5 days in a row because I'm like,
yeah, exactly.
I'm not doing it all the time. Like, bedtime is not fun for me. So I'm like, if you're home, like, you have bedtime. And if you're working, I have bedtime, obviously, because he works nights and he's not here. But yeah, we very much need a better system in our house because it doesn't work. But I'm like curious to kind of know if you've worked with people that have schedules like that, where it's like he sleeps all day, like he's home, but he sleeps most of the day. And then he gets up, he's like awake for a couple of hours, and he gets ready and he goes to like work. Like, on those days, it feels very like heavy for me because it's like, I have to do the dishes. I have to clean up all the toys, like, because he is like only available for like 2 hours, and he's like off. So,
not to mention then you are working and the kids are home with you, which makes it really hard to get help because you can't have a nanny because he's sleeping, because there's like 5 trillion moving pieces in Kenzie's life. So yeah, I want to hear that too.
What I would say to schedules like that, where you don't both just conveniently have like a 9 to 5 or whatever, So, and this goes into like, well, tell me about your lifestyle, because we need to implement something adapted to that. So you'll actually do it. So it will actually work, right? When you're doing this, like, well, first it's like, what is important to us? So, for instance, when you're like, I know I'm gonna have 5 days in a row, maybe you're like, okay, I'm doing like one cooked meal, and then I'm doing like pizza, and then I'm doing whatever, and I have no idea what your like nutritional goals are for your family. So yeah, maybe there's a world in which it's like home cooked meal with a vegetable side dish every day, right? Like, let's say that's the goal, right? It's in your head now, for the sake of conversation. It would be hard for that person to maybe embrace not doing that all the time. So sometimes you have conflicting priorities, like that's important, but also my sanity is important, right? And in this current week or whatever, feel in conflict. There is an element of, okay, what are you willing to sort of let go of temporarily for that? Or on the tidying, right? It's like, we have chosen to only tidy twice a week. Now, both of our kids are in school all day now. That one was in the stupid half-day kindergarten, is now in first grade. So that is like, any of you not in the phase of life where your kids are in school all day, like, I promise you it gets better. Like, it is like, it's so great. I know everyone would always tell me like, oh, enjoy these moments because you only get them once. And I'm like, okay. Like, and here's the truth. 2 things are true at the same time. It's like one of my favorite mantras. These times when they're little is like so fun. And also, what you are able to like do with your life when they are in school all day is also really great. Okay. So they're both true. And yes, there is life at the end of it. So, But we only, so again, it's a little better now, but back when that was not the case, and then especially in the summer, they're gonna be home all day. We tidy up twice a week, Wednesdays and Sundays. We do Sundays because it's like we're home all day. We like, even if we have plans, it's like we don't have school and work that day, and so we can't, like, for us. I know that's probably not true for you, Kenzie, with your true schedules, but there's like a day of the week where we're like, okay, it's convenient. We're gonna do Sunday, and then Wednesday is the literally other day that's like almost for sure guarantee we are all home in the evening, with the exception of like a random thing got planned. So it's like Wednesdays and Sundays. I take one, Chris takes one, right? And so it's like we've let go of like always having our various areas of our home tidy. So the first thing I would say is, like, when you're like Joey's tiering system, it's exactly right. It's okay, when this is going to be our life, we only do tier 1. When this is going to be our life, we do tier 4. And we plan on a monthly basis, like high level, and then we plan on a weekly basis. And we do it weekly because even within a month, like, things could change, but on a weekly basis, like, you probably know your husband's shifts that he's doing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you can see, like, oh my gosh, this is going to be a 5-day in a row week for me. This is going to be tier 1 only week. Okay, this is like an only 2 days in a row and then 2 days off and 2 days, whatever it is. Then you're like, okay, this week we can be extra. We can like do more. So, first, it's like, let's just get really clear on what's actually important to you. And when you have conflicting priorities, like they're both important, like which one will beat the other one in that scenario. And then once you kind of know what those things are, then it's like, okay, who is a reasonable person that can do this? If it's both of us, then figure out how you want to share it, rotate it, whatever it is. If it's like really it's only one of us because it's impossible for him to do bedtime when he is actually out there doing his job, right? He's not home. And so then it's like, okay, great. I know I can do this. But then it's like, as much as possible, actually have the uncomfortable conversation of, is it that you literally truly can't do it because your body is not in the house, or is it like uncomfortable or inconvenient for you to do? Like an example I love to give for this is, okay, let's say that you have someone who, for the sake of this example being like really obvious, someone is, they work only part-time. So and the other person works full-time and not at home. So this person objectively on paper has more hours available to do other stuff in the day. This is our scenario. Would it be more convenient for that person to do grocery shopping because they have more time? Sure. Is it impossible for this other person to do grocery shopping? No, it is not. Impossible for them to maybe do grocery shopping during their working hours, but they're not working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, probably, right? So they could grocery shop in the evening after the kids go to bed, or on their night off, their bedtime routine. They could grocery shop on the weekend. They could be in charge of groceries being delivered and putting them away, right? Like, there's all myriad of ways you can do grocery shopping. But we get caught up in thinking, I have to be the one to do this because I have more time, or I have more flexibility, or I have fill in the blank. When in reality, it's more convenient for me to do it. It's not that I have to be the one doing it. So that is kind of like the next part, is like, get really clear on what do you, given your schedule availability, have to do, and what are things that either of you really could do them, even if it's like kind of inconvenient. And maybe it's like, well, we like grocery shopping on Saturday so that we have food for the rest of the week because it's hard to do in the week. But your husband's like, well, I can do it on Thursday this week. It's like, cool. Then this week you're in charge of grocery shopping. You decide whatever it is. So, and in the beginning, it does take some extra. It takes effort because you're not used to being so detailed in your planning and your agreements and whatever. And it can feel like a lot, but what we have found, and what I have for sure found with some of the couples that I've done this with, is this is our new norm. So it's uncomfortable right now, but eventually it becomes normal. So the planning conversations don't take as long. There's some things built in that you already know, right? Or you've learned, we eventually figured out, we want to pre-plan who's going to do what. So now we do that, and it takes 5 minutes, So it feels like a lot in the beginning, but if you keep at it, which you will, if your values and goals are tied to that, right? Then it becomes like second nature for a lot.
And I love the idea of challenging some of these thoughts, whether it's gendered
tasks, or
Availability, like
availability, like you just said.
or competency, right? Well, you're better at it. Like there's so many reasons we might say one or other of us should do it.
Yeah. And I think, and this is me gonna, perpetuate the problem a little bit, but I work with a lot of women who have almost the opposite, kind of like what I was talking about of we don't need more challenging of, well, I could do it. I just, it feels very heavy, because that ultimately kind of leads to, no, I really could do it. And I'm just a failure. I'm working in broad strokes here, but I see that a lot with people of like, well, I could just do it. And if I was tough, or if I was this, that, or the other, then I really could find a way to do it. I'm just slacking. And it takes it to, let's also challenge the reason why you feel the need. Like, let's sit down.
100%.
Like, I will not ever forget you saying the word like neighbor Christmas gifts. I don't know why that just stuck with me. It's forever going to like,
I was like, I'm not doing those this year.
I'm not doing it. Maybe I just needed your example or something, but like that is the perfect like poster child of my, kind of arbitrary things that I value a lot, but not more than X, Y, and Z. And like challenging that shame and being like, who is shaming me? Just me. My neighbors aren't shaming me. My friends aren't shaming me. No one left me a hate note and egged my house saying you didn't send me a neighbor gift. No one actually cared. No one probably even noticed, but I'm sitting here in this puddle of shame going, wow, I can't believe I let that go. So like having a little more challenge on both sides of like, could you maybe do a little bit more, but also could you maybe do a little bit less? Like we need to challenge both sides of the spectrum.
That's what I do with people, right? Like
exactly. You did it for me.
Well, I'm glad. There's like multiple phases, because the first is like, here's like, if you were to write down everything you're possibly ever doing, right? Even if it's once a year, like the taxes, it's like, okay, both of you discuss, do you actually care about this thing? Do you need to be doing it? And so a lot of it comes up there, right? That's exactly where like neighbor Christmas gifts gets on the list,
Right.
So some of it's coming up there. Then some of it's coming up in, okay, now we're getting down a little more down to brass tacks, which is like I'm just gonna now steal your tiering system, Joey, but like these tier 1 items of like survivalhood, right? Like now we're getting down to like who's doing these things. That's where like another layer of the challenging comes, which is, do we really have to be doing this? I am doing too much. Why am I doing too much? And then also, why do you think you can't be the one to do that? Right? It like, to your point, it's on both ends of the spectrum, and both genders feel both of those things, right? So often men are like, maybe they wouldn't say this, and maybe they don't even surface level feel it, but something about caregiving maybe feels weird to them. There's certain things that are like, oh, I'm going to look like a really cool, awesome, amazing, engaged dad. But then there's other things that maybe won't appear that way. And so it's, let that go, like the shame, the fear, the whatever, like impacts everybody. And so in covering with each couple, like a question that when we get to a point when we're kind of like creating their system, and I ask, what is going to get in the way of you doing this? So we just put on paper that you will do these things. So like on paper, this seems real nice, but what do you think is going to get in the way of you actually doing it? And those kinds of things like can come up there, and maybe they don't think it will. And that's why like when I work with people, I handhold them through like, let's divide and say who's going to do one, plan it, and do a planning meeting. And I will literally actually do it with them the first time. And then I'm like, okay, and if they're going to do weekly check-in planning, great. They're going to do bi-weekly, great. Whatever it is. That next check-in, like I also do it with them, because maybe they like genuinely didn't think anything would get in the way, but then probably something got in the way. And it was either a logistical problem, something they didn't foresee, or they could have foreseen, but you're still new figuring out what's going on. Or it was, well, I didn't do it for this other reason. That's like some weird underlying core belief situation that we're going to figure out what's going on there, and decide if you want to still keep that thing or not. Challenging for all parties is unique to them and whatever they've acquired into their adulthood, and it can show up in like lots of different phases of doing this kind of work, and will continually be there. So the skill of learning how to challenge how to challenge yourself is great because you're going to probably never be done doing it. That sounds like so doomsday, like it gets easier and things like that. But I like I said, Chris and I still will get in little annoying things about who's doing what or be mad about something, and figure out like, well, where did that come from? Why did that happen?
Yeah. And to put a big, I was kind of getting into this when my internet cut out, but I keep mentioning that I like tried to put this spreadsheet of things together.
Yes.
And it is a huge miles and miles of improvement from where we were, thanks to you. But we're also now 45 days, month and a half into doing it since the new year. And January looked a lot different than February looked. Like we had to make some major tweaks. There's still I'm in charge of laundry now. Guys, I'm the worst. It's so interesting because it used to be like me looking at Mark going, can you help out? And now I am the problem. I am the one that keeps forgetting to switch it over to the dryer. Like I will admit, but it's so much easier to have the conversation. Anyways, long story short is, could this be DIY'd? Maybe. Is it really as effective as it could be, as quickly as it could be in all of the ways that you're challenging like the core of it? No. And so Rachel, for even just the three of us, tell us how we can work with you, if not everybody else who I genuinely know needs this, because so many of my friends are having this conversation of, I love my husband. I am not even mad at him, but gosh, this is hard. And I feel like I'm drowning. And that is like your bat signal. So how do we get a hold of you?
Great. So, fastest way. So I have a website. My company name is Elite Directions. Admittedly, I picked it when I was like, I don't know exactly what I like want to do, but I actually still like it because for me, the word elite is like an elite athlete is like, I have committed to so many things to achieve the greatness of my athleticism, right? So to me, it's like you are willing to like do the work, be uncomfortable, whatever, be very committed to doing it. And then directions is plural because again, like we've been talking about, like there's no one size fits all. I'm not going to tell you for sure this is how you should do it, but it's like I have tools that can be implemented in whichever direction you need to go. So Elite Directions is my company name. So elitedirections.com is my website. And there you can see a little bit more about me. I have if some people are like, I just want to dip my toe in. So it's like, let's pick one area. Let's pick like the meal planning, grocery shopping, cooking, dishes combo, or calendar sharing combo, whatever that is. All the way to burn it all down and help me rebuild it back up, right? So you can see all that on there. And then I have like a contact me there on website. I also do have Elite Directions on Instagram and LinkedIn. And I'll be honest, social media and me are new friends, and I am figuring out how much I want to do there. So, but for sure, I will get better and better at like putting content out there. But my website is, you can see enough stuff. And if like something doesn't immediately attract your attention, contact me anyway, because I created options to get people's thoughts going of what they think could be helpful for them. But ultimately, I will figure out with everyone what is going to be the most successful. So if someone's like, I like the idea of full blown, but I know I won't do it, I don't care that I would make more money doing that. I'm not going to do that with you because I actually want you to choose the thing you're really going to do, because that's what's going to get you success. And like you experienced, Joey, like you tasted a little bit and then you're like, oh yeah, I want more of that. So reach out to me there.
Cool. Okay. So Elite Directions. The website is great. I do follow you on Instagram, so that's good too. But we'll post the website and all of that in the show notes for this so people can reach out to you. And then you mentioned this, it'll be the release of this episode will be butting right up against your workshop, but tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah. So this author, Kate Mangino, and her book is kind of, what I love about it is the root cause of problems is what I built my career on doing. It's why I was really successful at all my operational stuff, was because I was like, not just, well, I guess this does this thing. It's like, well, why does it do that thing? How do we fix this big picture? So her book to me is the equivalent of that for like an equal partnership system. It really starts with the awareness of like, what is social conditioning, gender norms. How are we hurt by them? How do we perpetuate them? And so she and I are going to be hosting a workshop. It's a 1-hour workshop, and it will be part presenting kind of like some core parts of her book. By the way, registering for the workshop gets you a copy of her book. So like, you're going to buy the book anyway, you should go to the workshop. So it'll be her talking about some core parts of her book, some of these core principles where the awareness gathering really starts, followed by it's like a self-reflection period. We're going to have like a worksheet that people can follow along with and use. So it'll be like some questions, and ideally you go with your partner to this workshop. So maybe you're both answering it, maybe you're like verbally talking about it, however you want it to be. And then time for like comments, questions, whatever. And then kind of another little mini lecture on whatever the next topic is, and followed by that. And then at the very end, definitely having time for more Q&A with Kate and me. So that's like what the workshop is. There's 2 dates for it, kind of mid-March and then toward the end of March. So if this comes out before then like on my socials, you can see the link to register for that. So check it out.
Awesome. And that's virtual. They're virtual workshops.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. You can be anywhere.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for taking the time to explain all of this to us.
Thank you for having me. I love talking about it. So you know what? I will do it all day with anybody who wants to.
Perfect. I hope, like I said, just 1 hour at lunch with you, I was like already taking little pieces away that could help my family. And I know that like my kids have loved it. My husband has loved it, even though we're just like barely starting. And so, anyways, just a huge testimony to what you do and how well you do it. So
thank you so much.
Thank you for being here. And, we'll have your information for people in the show notes. Thanks for tuning in to the Profitability Podcast. For more business and finance content, follow us on Instagram at The Profitability Project LLC or visit our website at theprofitabilityproject.com.